The chilling air of the dense forest had always held a mystique for me, a pull that was both terrifying and irresistible. It was this fascination that led me to the old, seemingly forgotten cabin hidden deep within the woods, a place where my life would forever be changed. I was just a man, driven by an insatiable curiosity and a yearning for adventure, when I stumbled upon the cabin during a solo hiking trip. It was supposed to be a weekend of solitude, a break from the incessant noise of city life. However, what I encountered was something far beyond the realm of my wildest imaginations, something that would haunt me for the rest of my days. The cabin, cloaked in the shadows of towering pines, appeared as though it hadn't seen a visitor in decades. Its wooden exterior was weathered and worn, windows boarded up as if to keep something out, or perhaps something in. Despite the warning bells ringing in my head, my feet carried me closer, driven by an inexplicable force. As I approached the door, a cold breeze swept through the trees, sending shivers down my spine. I reached out, my hand trembling, and pushed the door open. The creaking of the hinges sounded like a mournful wail, a prelude to the horror that awaited me inside. The interior of the cabin was shrouded in darkness, the only light coming from the cracks in the boarded-up windows. As my eyes adjusted, I could make out the remnants of a life once lived, a dusty table, a few scattered chairs, and an old, rusted stove. It was as if the inhabitants had vanished into thin air, leaving everything behind. But it was the photographs that truly unsettled me. They were everywhere, covering the walls, each one depicting the same family, a man, a woman, and 2 children, their smiles frozen in time. Yet there was something deeply disturbing about their eyes, something that sent a chill down my spine. It was as if they were staring right through me, whispering secrets from beyond the grave. I should have left then, but my curiosity got the better of me. I ventured further into the cabin, each step echoing ominously in the silence. That's when I heard it, a faint, almost imperceptible whisper. At first, I thought it was the wind, but then it grew louder, more insistent. "Leave, leave now." The voice was barely a whisper, but it was enough to send a wave of panic through me. I spun around, intent on fleeing, but that's when I saw it. In the corner of the room, shrouded in shadows, was a figure. It was hunched over, its features obscured by the darkness, but I could feel its gaze upon me, penetrating, unyielding. I stumbled backward, my heart pounding in my chest, as the figure slowly began to move towards me. Its movements were jerky, unnatural, as if it wasn't quite human. I could hear its ragged breathing, a sound that filled the room and drowned out all else. In a moment of pure terror, I turned and ran, bolting out of the cabin and into the forest. Branches whipped at my face as I ran, the ground beneath my feet uneven and treacherous. I didn't dare look back, fear propelling me forward until I was certain I had escaped the nightmare behind me. I didn't stop running until I reached my car, parked miles away at the trailhead. Only then did I allow myself to collapse, gasping for breath, my body trembling uncontrollably. I knew I had narrowly escaped something unspeakable, something that defied all logic and understanding. The drive home was a blur, my mind reeling from the horror I had encountered. I told myself it was just a figment of my imagination, a trick of the mind brought on by isolation and fear. But deep down, I knew the truth. The cabin in the woods was real, and so was the terror that dwelled within it. I never returned to those woods, nor did I speak of what happened that day. Some truths are too terrifying to be shared, secrets that are meant to remain hidden in the shadows. But the memories of that cabin, and the chilling whisper that urged me to leave, will haunt me for the rest of my days, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurks just beyond the veil of our understanding. In the heart of a forgotten wood, under the shadow of ancient trees, there exists a tale so chilling it has seldom been shared until now. This is the account of the disturbing cabin, a true horror story that unfolded one autumn, casting a shadow over my life forever. My name is Alex, and I was merely 19 when my encounter with the inexplicable occurred. It was during a break from college when my friends and I decided to embark on a camping trip, seeking adventure away from the city's chaos. We were a group of 5, each one eager to escape the monotony of daily life. The destination was a secluded cabin in the woods, a place my friend Jake had found through an obscure rental website. It promised isolation, serenity, and a touch of the wild, exactly what we were looking for. We arrived late in the afternoon, the sun dipping low, casting long shadows that danced between the trees. The cabin, older than time itself, stood silently, welcoming us with its eerie charm. It was rustic, to say the least, with its wooden facade weathered by countless storms and windows that stared out like dark, unblinking eyes. The first night passed without incident. We spent it around the fire, sharing stories and laughs, the kind of night you wish could last forever. But as the fire died and we retreated into the cabin, a sense of unease began to take hold. The walls, lined with old, peeling wallpaper, seemed to close in on us, and the air grew heavy with a silence that was almost suffocating. It was on the second day that things began to unravel. We discovered an old, dusty journal hidden beneath the floorboards, its pages yellowed with age. The handwriting was erratic, filled with the ramblings of someone who had clearly lost their grip on reality. It spoke of shadows that whispered in the night, of a presence in the woods that was neither animal nor human. We laughed it off, attributing it to the overactive imagination of a previous tenant. Yet, as night fell, our laughter died in our throats. That night, the forest seemed alive with sounds we hadn't noticed before. Twigs snapping, leaves rustling, and a low guttural growling that seemed to surround the cabin. We told ourselves it was just the wind or perhaps a stray animal, but the fear had already taken root. By the third day, our group was on edge. Arguments broke out over trivial matters, the tension palpable in the air. It was then that Jake went missing. He had gone out at dawn, camera in hand, hoping to capture the sunrise, but he never returned. We searched the surrounding woods, calling his name, but it was as if he had vanished into thin air. Panic set in as the day wore on without any sign of Jake. It was during this frantic search that I stumbled upon a clearing I hadn't noticed before. At its center stood an ancient tree, its branches twisted in grotesque shapes, and there, at its base, was Jake's camera, abandoned and covered in mud. I picked it up, my hands shaking as I pressed the playback button. The last video showed Jake, his face pale and eyes wide with terror, as he whispered about seeing something in the woods, something that was watching him. The video ended abruptly, the screen going black, leaving me with more questions than answers. That night was the longest of my life. The cabin felt like a trap, each creak and groan of its old structure a reminder of our vulnerability. The sounds outside grew louder, more aggressive, as if whatever lurked in the darkness was closing in. We decided to leave at first light, packing our belongings with shaking hands. The atmosphere was thick with fear, each of us jumping at the slightest sound. It was then that we found Jake's journal, lying open on the table, a page filled with frantic scribbles that none of us remembered seeing before. It warned us to leave, to not look into the shadows, for that's where it hid, waiting for its next victim. We didn't need any further prompting. As the sun rose, casting weak light through the dense canopy, we left the cabin behind, the eerie feeling of being watched, never leaving us. The drive back was silent, each of us lost in our thoughts, trying to make sense of what had happened. Jake was never found, his disappearance a mystery that haunts me to this day. The police searched the area, but the cabin had seemingly vanished, as if swallowed by the forest itself. Questions were left unanswered, and the horror of those days lingered like a shadow, a constant reminder of the darkness that lies hidden in the heart of the woods. This story, my story, is a testament to the unknown terrors that lurk in the forgotten corners of the world. It's a warning to heed the signs, to respect the ancient and unexplainable forces that exist just beyond our understanding. For in the heart of the woods, in a cabin that may or may not exist, Horror waits for those daring enough to look into the shadows. In the dense forests of the Pacific Northwest, nestled among towering pines and veiled by the fog that often blankets the area, stood a cabin that had been in my family for generations. It was a rustic, log structure built by my great-grandfather as a hunting lodge. Despite its age, the cabin had always been a place of solace and adventure for me, a sanctuary from the bustling noise of city life. However, one autumn, that perception was shattered, transforming the cabin from a place of refuge to a scene of unspeakable horror. The events unfolded during a solo hunting trip, intended as a brief respite before the onset of winter. I arrived late in the afternoon, the sun already beginning its descent, casting long shadows that danced eerily among the trees. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and the promise of snow. I unpacked my gear, lit the old wood stove, and settled in for the evening, unaware of the nightmare that awaited me. That night, as the wind howled and the cabin creaked under the strain of age, I was jolted awake by a sound that froze my blood, a scratching at the door, slow and deliberate, as if whatever lurked outside was savoring the fear it instilled. My heart pounded against my ribcage, and I lay paralyzed, hoping the sound would cease. But it persisted, growing more insistent with each passing moment. Summoning every ounce of courage, I crept to the window, peering into the darkness. The moon, full and bright, illuminated the clearing in front of the cabin, but revealed nothing. The scratching stopped, replaced by a deafening silence that seemed to press in from all sides. I returned to bed, convincing myself it was just an animal, perhaps a raccoon or a stray dog, trying to find shelter. The next day passed without incident, and I managed to push the events of the previous night to the back of my mind. As dusk approached, I decided to explore the woods, hoping to spot some game. The forest was alive with the sounds of nature, a stark contrast to the silence that had enveloped the cabin. It was on my way back, as the light began to fade, that I stumbled upon it. An old, dilapidated shed, hidden by overgrowth, not far from the cabin. Its door hung ajar, swaying gently in the breeze, beckoning me closer. Curiosity overcame caution, and I approached, pushing the door open with the barrel of my rifle. The interior was shrouded in darkness, the air thick with the smell of decay. My eyes adjusted slowly, revealing a scene that sent shivers down my spine. The floor was littered with bones, small and large, unmistakably human. Among the macabre collection were personal belongings, rusted and decayed, hinting at the lives they once belonged to. Panic set in, and I fled back to the cabin, barricading the door behind me. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I had seen. Were these the remains of hunters like myself, who had stumbled upon this cursed place? Or were they victims of something far more sinister, lurking in the shadows of the forest? As night enveloped the cabin once more, the scratching returned, more desperate now, accompanied by a low, guttural growl that seemed to emanate from the very bowels of the earth. I realized then that the shed was not the source of the horror. It was merely a symptom of a deeper, darker presence that had claimed these woods as its own. The hours until dawn were agonizing, filled with sounds that no human should ever hear. When morning finally broke, I emerged from the cabin, weary and shaken, to find the door marred by deep gouges, as if some beast had tried to claw its way in. I left that day, vowing never to return. The cabin still stands, a silent sentinel in the woods, but its secrets remain hidden, buried beneath the canopy of trees. The horrors I witnessed haunt my dreams, a chilling reminder of the thin veil that separates the known from the unknown, the natural from the supernatural. To this day, I wonder what became of the shed and its grisly contents, whether they were ever discovered by others. But some mysteries are best left unsolved, some truths too terrifying to contemplate. The cabin in the woods, once a place of refuge, now stands as a monument to fear, a testament to the darkness that dwells just beyond the edge of the light. In the heart of the dense woods of northern Wisconsin, where the pines whisper secrets of old and the nights stretch longer than the days, there exists a cabin. This is not just any cabin, but one that harbors a story so disturbing it chills the marrow of those who dare to whisper it. My encounter with this forsaken place is one I wish upon no soul, yet it is a tale that must be told, for the horrors of that place were all too real. It began as an adventure, a way to escape the monotony of city life. My friend Alex and I, both in our early 20s and hungry for some semblance of excitement, decided on a whim to spend a weekend in the woods. We were both avid fans of the outdoors, equipped with enough camping gear to survive weeks in the wilderness. However, our enthusiasm blinded us to the warnings of the locals, who spoke in hushed tones of a cabin nestled deep within the forest, a place they referred to only as the Hollow. The first night passed without incident, under a sky so clear the stars seemed but a hand's reach away. It was on the second day, while exploring the dense underbrush, that we stumbled upon it. The cabin, decrepit and leaning slightly to one side, its windows like the vacant eyes of a skull, seemed to watch us approach. Its door, barely hanging on by rusted hinges, creaked ominously as the wind passed through the gaps in the timbers. Despite every instinct screaming at me to turn back, curiosity, that most dangerous of desires, urged me forward. Alex, ever the braver of us two, stepped inside first. The air was thick with the smell of mold and decay, a tangible darkness that seemed to swallow the light. The interior was sparse, a single room with a fireplace, a rickety table, and a mattress that lay in the corner, its fabric stained with the passage of time. But it was the walls that held our attention, covered in what appeared to be claw marks, deeply etched into the wood as if something had tried desperately to escape. We should have left then, but we didn't. Instead, we decided to spend the night, a decision fueled by a mix of arrogance and a desire to prove our mettle. As night fell, we lit a fire in the fireplace, the flickering flames casting dancing shadows that seemed almost alive. The wind howled like the cries of the damned, and somewhere, deep within the woods, a branch snapped, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the silence. Sleep was a distant dream, the atmosphere of the cabin oppressive, as if a heavy blanket had been laid over us. It was just past midnight when we heard it, a soft thumping, like the sound of a heartbeat, coming from beneath the cabin. I told myself it was just the wind, or perhaps some small animal seeking refuge from the cold. But then, the thumping grew louder, more insistent, accompanied by a scratching that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. Terrified, we huddled together, watching as the shadows began to move with a life of their own, twisting into shapes that no shadow had any right to assume. The air grew colder, our breaths visible in the flickering light, and then, as suddenly as it had begun, the noises stopped. The silence that followed was suffocating, a quiet so complete it felt as though the world had ceased to exist outside the cabin's walls. We did not sleep that night, nor did we speak. We simply waited for the dawn, watching the shadows and listening to the silence. When morning finally arrived, we fled the cabin, not stopping to gather our belongings, driven by a primal fear that urged us to put as much distance between us and that accursed place as possible. Once back in the safety of civilization, we attempted to rationalize our experience, to dismiss it as the product of our imaginations, amplified by the isolation and the darkness. But there was no denying the marks on the walls, nor the feeling of utter terror that had enveloped us. We had ventured into a place that was not meant for the living, a place that held a darkness so profound it lingered with us long after we had left. The locals, upon hearing of our night in the cabin, offered little in the way of surprise. Instead, they shared stories of others who had ventured into the hollow, drawn by curiosity or bravado, never to return the same. Some spoke of a curse, others of a malevolent presence that guarded the cabin, feeding on the fear of those who dared to intrude upon its domain. As for Alex and I, We were forever changed by our experience. We speak little of that night, each of us carrying the burden of our encounter in our own way. But the memory of the cabin in the woods remains, a stark reminder of the thin veil that separates the known from the unknown, and of the darkness that dwells just beyond the edge of the light. So heed this tale as a warning, for there are places in this world that are best left undiscovered, secrets that are best left untold. The cabin in the woods stands as a testament to such horrors, a monument to the darkness that lies in wait, eager to ensnare the unwary. Venture not into the hollow, lest you too become a part of its disturbing true horror story.